Our next keynote speaker is Aatif Awan, I'm very pleased to welcome him. He is the founder and managing partner of Indus Valley Capital, which is a early stage Pakistan-focused venture capital fund. And he has led the first investment rounds for Bazaar, Airlift, AimFit, and is the board director on all of these. Previously, he was VP Growth and International on LinkedIn and has done tremendous, amazing things there as well. So I'm very pleased to welcome Aatif Awan.
Hello, everyone. How many Coke Studio fans here? Yeah, I thought quite a few. So I have a question for you all. If Pakistani startup ecosystem last year had a soundtrack, which Coke Studio song would you pick? Pasuri, lots of Pasuri fans? No, I would go with actually Piche Hut, because the chorus line is Piche Hut, Rasta Chodiye, Ab Hum Aa Gaye. So Pakistani startups have truly arrived in 2021. And that's what I'm going to be talking about today. Can we get the slides going? Okay. So I was driving on 101 today, and I took the shoreline exit to get here earlier, and that took me back to my LinkedIn days because that's a path I've taken for years, and it's not very far from here. And just as until 3 years ago, actually, I didn't know what was happening in Pakistani startup ecosystem because like many of us here, I was heads down on my job. I was heads down on the Silicon Valley, startup scene, investing scene here. And what happened actually was in 2018, I left LinkedIn after 7 years and I decided to take a year off because I didn't really know what I wanted to do next. So spent, like half of that traveling, half of that in Pakistan, where my parents are. And while I was there, I, for the first time ever, started, paying attention to Pakistani startups. Founders started reaching out. And what I realized was, 2016 to 2018, Pakistani startups were raising only $10 million a year on average in VC funding, which is not like even a decent sized round here in Valley. And that's for a country of 200 million plus people, 5 cents per capita. And that made no sense, right? Because the founders who were reaching out to me, I thought they were great, and even more incredible founders who were moving back, having worked in the Valley to Pakistan, and that didn't make any sense. And then you looked at fundamentals of the market, and that didn't make any sense as well, because Pakistan, fifth largest country, 225 million people now, and a very, very young country at that, so 22 years of median age. And that matters a lot because, and I think this is a very important point for the immigrants, Pakistani immigrants here in the room, is when you move back early 2000s or maybe 90s, your image of Pakistan kind of gets stuck at that point, because whenever you go visit for annually 2 weeks holiday, that's just gets spent in family dinners. You don't get to see the new generation. But this generation is very, very different, right? They are internet natives. They grew up, with ambitions way bigger than any of ours, right? And what's going to happen is for the next couple of decades at least, every person retiring from Pakistani workforce will be replaced by 3 of these young people entering the workforce. So any way you slice it, there's a lot of political noise right now happening. None of that stuff matters. That's just noise. The fundamental fact of Pakistan is that you have an incredible workforce tailwind, demographic tailwind at your back. And that's the future of Pakistan, and that's what's going to define it. Do we have the slides now? Great. Okay, so I talked through this. Let me go back. Okay, so that 3-to-1 ratio, that's very, very important to remember, because that's a massive driving force, and that's already been happening. If you look at consumer spending, for instance, in Pakistan, the reason that middle class continues to grow is in part because of that demographic tailwind, because this new generation also likes to, they produce more, but they also like to consume more. So this data from Brookings Institution shows that Pakistani middle class is going to be the 7th largest consumption class based on daily spending numbers in the world by 2030. And the absolute increase, in this decade is actually the highest after India, China, and Indonesia, right? And what we have seen is that all three of those ecosystems, they were a bit ahead of us in terms of this demographic trend and also technology adoption trend. They've done tremendously well. And now we are just getting started on that path. Now, this large middle class, it drives consumption across all verticals. So if you do the math on that, you can expect today our economy is about $350 billion and consumer spending is about $260 billion. So that consumer spending grows to $400 billion. And by 2032. And from VC perspective, startup perspective, that 10-year is the lens you're taking. And then once that happens, if you slice it where that share of wallet is, actually, you have massive, multiple sectors where tens of billions of dollars every year is going to be spent. And then one way of, guesstimating this opportunity, the size of this opportunity is if you have this $400 billion in spending in 2032, now that's the online annual spend. Give it an enterprise multiple. Give it put the discounts to emerging markets, put the discount of Pakistan, all of that. Give it just a multiple of, 2x, right? And then assume only 20% of this is online because this is the total pie, right? Today we are at 2%, this goes 20%. So you get 80 billion in online consumer spending, give it a multiple of 2, you get with $160 billion in enterprise value that's going to create it. Now go back, put 0% growth for the next decade. That number still is massive. It's still going to be at least $80 billion, or $100 billion in enterprise value that's going to be created. Now, who is going to create this value? It's not going to be the existing companies in Pakistan. If they knew how to, they would have done already, right? So it's going to be these new companies that are going to get created today. Some of them, I think, have been created in the last couple of years, but a lot of them are going to be created in the years to come. So that's why I'm super excited about this market. What's happened here is that if you look at any ecosystem, startup ecosystem, what it takes to thrive, typically there is a flywheel, right? So it doesn't take one thing. You can't just have the government change the regulations. It happens. You can't move like a bunch of people back. It happens. It has to start with this internet penetration, right? So that's something that happened at different pace in different countries. So in Pakistan, I think in 2018, when I was there, spending time there, that's when you had like 50 million broadband subscribers. So it started to happen, 25% penetration. Now it's 110 million plus broadband 3G, 4G connected mobile internet users. And as this critical mass got hit, what happens is that the first wave of founders who were really ambitious, they started to take on problems, right? So that's when you saw somebody like the co-founder CEO of Airlift, Gol, drops out of INSEAD after having worked at DoorDash and saying, look, I'm going to drop out of MBA, move to Lahore and start this thing. In 2019, when there is like the last 3 years where you were just seeing $10 million in VC, right? People start believing that. You had, like Baikia and a bunch of other folks, Bazaar to follow later, and then Retailo and a lot of other folks who followed after. So you start this wave of founders. And then along with that, in parallel, you have VCs who also start moving, right? So there were like a handful of local VCs who saw this early and went there. Like we started Indus Valley Capital in late 2019, early 2020. And those two together then bring even more founders and more VCs, and this flywheel continues to go on. And as these startups create value, like all of a sudden you see more and more people come on internet, right? Who knew that, you'll have millions of small mom and pop retail store merchants be such big adopters of technology in Pakistan. Like WhatsApp, everybody's like, oh, they're watching YouTube and they're messaging on WhatsApp, but they're not going to use it for their business. Guess what? The hottest sector in Pakistan is B2B marketplace. Between them, they have raised like $200 million in VC funding, just the B2B marketplace. And that's on the back of really millions of people using apps to conduct their business, track their payments, order their inventory online and stuff. So then that kind of feeds back to that increased usage, and the flywheel continues. And then the internet penetration, in Pakistan, like that, I think like we're now looking very, very good. It's very cheap. Average data price now is like less than the dollar, getting like around 60 cents. which means it's very, very affordable. And what you've seen is that if you look at 15-plus-year-old population, there's 145 million people, 110 million broadband connections. There's some duplicates in there, but still very, very high penetration. And that the usage of internet in terms of terabytes, like that's been doubling every year. Now, then the next part of the flywheel was the founders, and that actually requires a lot of tech talent as well, right? So Pakistan has always had strong tech talent. A lot of it just moved out, and like in Valley, if you go to any company, you'll see Pakistanis there and doing really, really well. But even in Pakistan, there is close to 400K software professionals, right? 400,000, growing, like every year by about 25K. Lots of incubators and accelerators, and multiple unicorns. Like I've listed 4 here who have had significant R&D presence in the country. So Kareem was sold to Uber for $3 billion. First lines of codes were actually written in Pakistan. And then there are a bunch of others as well. And what's happened is, like given this talent, given the internet penetration, now founders have come and they're building startups in every vertical already. So here is just a listing of startups, which is those, and this is the short list that have raised 1 million plus in VC capital, because I had to, manage that on one slide somehow. But you can see is that, it's not just one vertical. It's B2C e-commerce, B2B e-commerce, fintech, travel, across the board. And this is just the first wave. What we'll see is as these companies become successful, as even more VC capital comes, you'll see enterprise startups happen as well. You'll see deep tech startups coming in as well. But this is a very, very, promising list of companies, and all of this has happened very, very quickly. And what that's done is, like this shows the picture. So I mentioned 2016, 2018, averaging $10 million. Things started moving in 2019. First round capital invested in Airlift Series A in 2019. I was meeting like VC from New York, who just started looking at Pakistan, and he was reminding, he was like, oh, I remember like when I saw that news, and I was like, why is first round investing in Pakistan? And that kind of, because first round is a very, tier 1, early stage VC, earliest investor in Uber, Square, Notion, Roblox, but doesn't invest abroad. They've done 500 investments to date. Only 10 of them are outside US. Of those 10, 5 are Israeli companies that are building for the US market. So it was a rare event, but that got people to take attention. Process did by Kia Series B a bit later. Again, very well-respected investor, largest investor in Tencent. So, now that drove that momentum, and 2020 was a bit higher than 2019, but 2021 was just a breakout year. So $350 million in VC capital raised, more than all prior years combined. And 2022, just in April, we're already hitting $200 million in VC funding, despite the global slowdown in venture capital that we are seeing. Now, aside from the dollars that are coming in, what also matters is who is investing, right? So if you index Pakistan to India of 2005, which is when India started, right? Look at first 3 years. If you index it to Indonesia or MENA region, actually this list is remarkable. Like within the first 3 years of ecosystem's growth, getting such names to invest, first round, Kleiner, Tiger Global, Dragoneer, Process, so some of the very well-respected VC funds, crossover funds, as well as new solo VCs like 20 VC and Buckley, accelerators like Y Combinator, 500 startups, like doubling down very quickly, companies like Stripe, Visa, Nubank, Flexport. So it's across the board, like some of the best investors in all these categories are coming to Pakistan very, very quickly. And that speaks to the power of Pakistani diaspora, because we were so well connected with especially the US ecosystem that we were all, able to pull this very, very quickly. And if you go to, look at the founders and executives at companies who are investing in Pakistan, it gets even better, right? Because it's the who's who of Silicon Valley. So Biston, founder of Twitter and Medium, Tony Xu from DoorDash, Tawit from TransferWise, Imad from Mercury, William Hockey from Plaid. Like some of the best founders in the world, and they're not writing 25K checks. These are like significant capital they're injecting, as well as the CXO VP level execs of like basically all the, like top companies in the Valley that you can imagine. So I think like we're in a very, very good spot now. And then the next question was, where will, the large enough follow-on capital come from, right? And I think like last year and like this Q1, that's also been squashed away. It's very clear. Like 3 years ago when I was starting down this path, like people were asking this question, where will the follow-on capital come from? And my answer always was, look, there's never been a company in the world that was performing really well, capturing market share very fast, making money, and it, like died only because nobody was willing to invest in. Like either the company is not doing well or there is capital available. And that's exactly what happened. So if you look at these like top 7, 8 rounds that have mostly happened, like recently, Airlift Series B was $85 million. Bazaar Series B, $70 million. Retailer did a $36 million Series A. Bazaar, $30 million Series A. Jugnu, 22. Tajir, 17. Kispe, 15. So like this is real capital, and that's the kind of capital you need to build unicorns. And I think we're well on our way to building some of those companies. And our first 2 investments were Airlift and Bazaar. So they together have raised, each of them has raised $100 million plus in just last 2 to 3 years. So I think it's just phenomenal how quickly some of these companies are growing and raising capital. So to bring all of this back together, like when I was looking at this market in 2018, 2019, Indonesia was our comparison point, and there was a gap of a decade. So 2019 Pakistani VC was 2009 in Indonesia, relatively, if you looked at how much VC was coming in and so on. If you look at it today, actually, 2021 looks more like 2014 or 15 in Indonesia. So not only the flywheel of internet startup and VC is working in Pakistan very well, it's actually moving faster than Indonesia. So we covered like 5 years of distance in 2, and that's really, really fantastic. So I'm going to just wrap up with, what's ahead and what can we expect. So, we have a lot of momentum here because the biggest thing that brings really, really, significant follow-on capital is seeing these success stories of what's possible when you deploy earlier capital, right? So now we are seeing that these companies, they've gone, to 100 million plus in GMV run rate, 150 million plus in GMV run rate in just a couple of years, and like multiple of them have done it. So from that perspective, we see the VC funding continue, and that's what Q1 is reflecting. We expect this year to end at north of 750 million in VC dollars. The second point is last year has been just up and to the right? So when that happens, you have a lot of excitement, a lot of companies get started. Now, the nature of startups is it's a high-risk business, right? So we will see some failures this year as the ecosystem starts to mature, because, startups are hard. It's not just about fundraising. Hiring is hard. There is competition in these markets, strategy is hard. So I think we'll have some failures. It's going to be healthy for the ecosystem as a whole, and then we'll mature as a result. The third thing that we can expect is talent wars, which you're already seeing. So, yes, Pakistan has a lot of talent, but, now there's some serious money chasing it as well, and especially at, specialized and senior talent. So that's going to heat up and get competitive. And I think one of the opportunity for people here in the Valley is, if you have been thinking about, moving back, and I know a lot of us have, right? Parents are growing old, or, your kids are growing older, family reasons. But historically, there hasn't been a good professional reason to do it, right? If you work in tech, you don't want to go and work for a bank or an MNC. But now that has changed. There's some fantastic opportunities. Actually, some opportunities I think are better than what you'll do in Valley in terms of learning and growth potential. So that's the way to, participate in this ecosystem. And then the final note is, yes, it looks very exciting, but in the grand scheme of things, if you look at how much global VC capital there's getting deployed every year, India is doing, 30 billion plus a year. If you do that ratio with India, we should be at $4 or $5 billion a year. So it's still very, very early. It's still day one, and we're just getting started. Only 2 to 3% of consumer spending is online. It will go to 20%, and that's a massive, massive opportunity. And if we think from just Pakistan's, political and economic lens, I feel truly that some of the most transformational companies in Pakistan, they're yet to be built. And when we look back at 2030, we would have seen that they're getting started today. So now is the time to engage with them. And with that, thank you.